Sir, shall we start? Sir, shall we start now?
Yeah, whenever you are ready.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Please make it open and Kalyan, you can leave it. Respected Professor Ashutosh Sharma, Chief Guest of today's National Science Day celebrations at CSIR NGRI, former directors of CSIR NGRI, chairman and members of Research Council of CSIR NGRI, colleagues, students, and friends who joined online. Namaskar and greetings of National Science Day, which is celebrated every year on 28 February to commemorate the discovery of Raman effect. Government of India designated 28 February as National Science Day in 1986. Since then, we celebrate the National Science Day on 28 February each year with a lot of zest and passion to acclaim the major achievements in the different fields of science, and many programs are conducted to popularize science among the general. These celebrations spread the message about the significance of science and its role to improve the daily lives of the common folks, simultaneously inculcating the scientific temper and encourage interest in the science and technology. So for this purpose, there cannot be a better person than the former Secretary of Government of India Science and Technology, Professor Ashutosh Sharma ji. I would also like to let everyone know briefly that the scientific theme-based celebration of National Science Day began in 1999, and incidentally, the first theme was Our Changing Earth. And that remains still in the forefront of our scientific endeavor, particularly at our institute, which also not only being the only planet where the life survives, but also provides for all the resources for the sustainability of the life on this earth. This year, the theme of the National Science Day celebration is integrated approach in science and technology for sustainable future, reflecting the aspirations in the 75th years of our independence, aptly termed as Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav. Another new dimension which has been added while we celebrate the National Science Day on 28th, the National Science Day week, a science festival named Vigyan Sarvat Pujyate. And you understand the meaning of it, and therefore all the scientists, those who pursued the science, had become having much more responsibilities now when it is being taught that the solution of science, scientific solutions, are the only way of our progress. To bring and to make how science has provided a long and enduring solutions for several issues at national and international level, we all are very privileged and very proud that Professor Asutosh Sharma, who has a varied scientific interest and most importantly, the interest of reaching to the young people, are with us today. I cannot be more than grateful to the Professor Asutosh Sharma, who had kept his word us few years back when we have invited him. He said that every year Department of Science and Technology celebrates the Science Day, and it is difficult for him to travel from Delhi to Hyderabad. However, after demitting the office, the first Science Day, he has chosen to be with us, and we are very much grateful to you, sir, for this honor today. By profession, Professor Sharma is an engineer who had practiced science in a very different capacities, having a research interest in the soft nano fabrications to interfacial and colonial interactions. His research contributions are highly interdisciplinary, spanning a wide spectrum in nanotechnology. You all know how important nanotechnology is today in the present era. Thin polymer films, nanocomposite and devices in energy, health, and the environment, functional interfaces, micro nanomechanics of the soft matters, and several others. Because of his very outstanding scientific contributions, several organizations have bestowed honors on him that include Infosys Prize in Engineering and Computer Sciences, the TWAS Prize from the World Academy of Sciences, Vessel Research Award of the Humboldt Foundation, J.C. Bose Fellowship, Swanti Swarup Bhatnagar Prize. There are several prizes and awards which are listed in the honors and award list of Professor Sharma. I will not go in detail about all of them. You can see even on his Wikipedia information. He is elected fellow of all three distinguished science academies of India and also the Indian National Academy of Engineers. He is also fellow of the World Academy of Sciences, and there are several others uh, distinction which makes Professor Sharma a very different individual. Those who are not aware, he had a very keen interest in the ancient history, philosophy, poetry, and art. He is also very good photographer. I have seen he loves to keep the archive of the old histories. I have seen while he himself takes the photographs in IIG, the old geomagnetic laboratory in the country. Besides, he is a wonderful sketcher since 1979 and has more 400 sketches to his credit, which is already reflected on his personal homepage. I can keep going on his achievements, uh, his active involvement with science and scientists, but I would like that we all listen from him how the science and scientists will be in the future centuries. With this brief introduction, I once again uh, express our gratitude for being with us today and looking forward for his lecture for his, all of us and the next generation of scientists particularly. Thank you, sir, and it's over to you.
Thank you, Professor Tiwari. Thank you very much for inviting me to NGRI, which you are right that we have been in communication earlier. For me to visit there is perhaps one of the few CSIR labs that I did not have the privilege and pleasure of visiting. Something that I need to remedy on my next visit to Hyderabad. But thank you very much. As we know that the National Science Day is a symbol, is a celebration of what Acharya Raman was able to achieve. The modified scattering called the Raman effect was the final experiments for that were done sometime around 16th February 1928. The paper was then published in the 31st March issue of Nature, and 2 years later, it could receive Nobel Prize, one of the fastest Nobel Prize, especially in those days when things were very slow. So this is fairly clear that this is both a symbol and a motivational factor for us to recall the great strides that were made in those days by Indian science and scientists. But of course, you cannot just dedicate a day just to recall the glories of the past. There must be a message in it for the future, for our contemporary times. I think the science of today and the way science is moving in the future, there are a whole lot of lessons from that era. That was an era of very unified, holistic science. In between, many things got fragmented in very, very airtight containers of knowledge. A whole lot of fragmentation of knowledge, and for good reasons, for undergraduate teaching, for getting certain kind of jobs and everything. But if you were to look at the real cutting edge and the challenges of the future, we could not take those watertight or airtight compartments of knowledge very seriously. So it's not just the analysis, but also synthesis of many different streams of science, engineering, technology, and even social sciences, which are going to be playing a very compelling role in our further progress, both in science and its applications. So let me very quickly load my PPTs. See, if I share the desktop, then I can only see this picture, the room that you are sitting in. So is there a computer guy who can help us with this? So when I share my desktop, that I'm able to see only the PPT. The screen one, which is the desktop, my desktop should not show this picture, which is what it's doing right now. Um,
Sir, can you try now?
yeah, but my see, my screen is showing only this camera, which is
Sir, you please minimize windows.
Sir, please minimize window.
okay. Now,
Sir, after Teams present.
After Teams, there is a presentation, sir, right? If you see on cursor, after Teams, there is a PPT. It shows on your.
no PPT, but okay, right. That this would actually not play in the slide mode unless I share my desktop. But let's try it. Can you see the PPT now?
Yes, sir. Can you just make projection, sir, now?
Yeah. Now I will go to the slide mode, slide presentation mode, and let us see if we still can see it. Can you see? Yeah, you can see it.
No, sir. I think again there is some glitch.
Yeah, no, there is no glitch. I know what the glitch is. There is, you see, you would not see the full. Can you see the full screen slide presentation now?
Not yet, sir. F5 you can press it.
Hmm?
F5, if you can put, sir, on keyboard.
Keyboard.
F5 on top of the keyboard.
5.
F.
What is 5? F5.
Function 5, sir. F5.
Okay, function. Okay. Yeah, I did that. Can you see it now?
So, sir, our people are saying that can you give us control?
Yeah, certainly I can. How do I do that?
How to do that?
Allow. Okay. Yeah, I allowed control. Okay, you can see it now. No, can you see it now?
Sir, we can see, but we are still not able to resolve it. Can we again try again sharing your screen, and then we'll unshare, sir, and then.
Now I can't even. I can exit from here. Okay. So what should I do? Exit and then join again? I mean, stop sharing. I stopped sharing now.
Yes, sir. So
Now I
now,
will
please share.
share it again. The point is, you see, I cannot share my desktop because the camera is sharing.
So,
I need
sir,
to turn off that camera.
Excuse me, sir.
Ah.
Sir, now you share, sir. Click the share button, sir.
I did that already. Now so do you want to share me the desktop or just the slide?
Desktop.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that seems to work.
Yes, now
Yeah.
you press, sir, after 66, one cup button is there. Please press that one.
Which one?
Yes, sir. The icon on which you have placed, please press that one. After 66, yes, press that.
Six. Yeah. That slideshow.
Yes, sir. It's come.
It works, sir. It works very well, sir. Thank you. Sorry for.
Wonderful, wonderful. No, just lights and shadows of technology. But we eventually get the hang of it. There is also a little window which is coming in the way of my view of the slides. Can you minimize that? Okay, no, I got it. Thank you very much indeed. I was saying that we are talking about science and scientists in the new millennium, or what I call the brave new world. So what I wanted to look at very quickly is this brief talk. It's not about a particular problem in science. It's not about a particular area of science, because this is what we get in our conferences, in our meetings, and so on. When we talk to our peers, when we send papers for review, and so on. So what I want to focus on very quickly is what is the broad picture of drivers and directions of science, technology, and innovation. This is when we look at the future, when you look at the sustainability, both of resources and knowledge in the future. What are the emerging challenges and therefore opportunities? And what kind of new mind is actually needed in the scientist, in our scientist, in order to be able to meet those challenges and leverage the opportunities. So this is about the architecture, the structure, and processes of doing effective science, which is something which is common to all, regardless of the area in which I work. Beyond the confines of those kind of things, we don't really discuss we go to scientific meetings. We never discuss the processes of science. What we discuss is the final output, outcome of science, which is presented in a linear way, even though the processes of doing science are non-linear. Let us first very quickly look at the status of science technology in the country, where we are. Um, so there is a good news. There is reason for optimism, which is that now the country is number 3 in scientific publications, including the cutting edge areas of engineering, nanotechnology, materials, even artificial intelligence. It's not always been like this. Just 10 years ago, we were number 10 in the world. So there have been a very rapid progress. We are also number 3 in number of startups, even in number of unicorns, which are coming up very quickly. As we know, we have deep strengths in R&D institutions, universities, R&D labs such as CSIR, IITs, ICERs, NICERs, NIPERs, what have you. So there is indeed a very deep strength, both in terms of infrastructure and human resources and the knowledge resources. Demography is great. So we are a young country, which means a lot of young, educated, energetic people who are available to drive forth both for our quest for knowledge and for our quest for prosperity. But there's a caveat that, of course, that this demography is a huge advantage, but this is a window of opportunity which would not be open forever. Give another 30 to 40 years, Indian population would be aging like everywhere else, which means it can easily become a demographic liability, which means more older people to support who are not as productive anymore. That's the reality. So therefore, there is the opportunity. It's not forever. The demographic opportunity and strength. Another 30 years, we just have to make sure that our science and technology is working for us at 100% speed and scale. New enabling policies are very important because science and technology, and especially its diffusion and its application, does not work in isolation with society. and the other processes that happen in society. Uh, of course, another strength is huge diversified markets, both the scale of market as well as the fact that this is very diverse brings in strength and the demand which is there. Having said, having counted all the strengths and how science and technology can be a huge enabler for that, there is always a but. So what is the but about? The but is while quantity is sufficient, being in number three, and quantity per unit dollar investment is really number one in the world, but the quality of R&D still has some gap to travel, which means whether we look at the impact in whichever way that it is measured of the knowledge that is being generated, the relevance and direction of that research is of utmost importance, especially for applied research, because not having a relevance and a connect and a direction with the eventual stakeholders of that knowledge would be a huge weakness. Of course, that there is research which is profound and research which is incremental, research which is disruptive and research which is business as usual. There is also research which creates leadership as well as research which is, the bulk of people are basically followers of the latest fashion or latest trends or wherever they may come from. So it is about leadership, especially recognizing our India-centric needs for science and technology, and especially technology and in terms of engineering. Um, and being innovative, in other words, transforming our knowledge to new resources and the connects of that knowledge with the stakeholders. And finally, I would say something which is extreme importance because this sets the agenda for all of R&D, for all of our scientists and so on, which is the educational system, starting from the school days all the way to PhD and beyond. So education, emphasis on creativity, risk taking, independent thinking, and learning as opposed to simply cracking the exams. So this is because you see all our education is a little bit passive. It does not encourage independent thinking and so on because it's geared towards cracking exams and taking up a job. Now, once you come to research, you come to development and innovation. We want actually 180-degree opposite of all of these traits. What we need is somebody who questions and be independent, take risk, has the learning as opposed to simple education, and has creativity. So all these traits, which are not highly valued in the educational system, then turn up as major weaknesses in our R&D ecosystem. Now, somebody, I just read an article which said if you want more Nobel Prizes, double the investment in R&D. Of course, we need to double investment in R&D, but that's a separate aspect. Another outcome of doubling investment in R&D could simply be having 50% more incremental number of papers. So both the outcomes are equally possible, but it's more likely that if we were not actually prepared at the base of the pyramid, then no matter what else we do, there would be a weird failure in everything that we do. Okay, let us switch some gears and say, look, in terms of R&D, in terms of innovation, we often underestimate the value of lateral thinking, creativity, and even common sense. Because it's true that once I'm done with PhD and postdocs and everything else, my vision of what science is becomes rather narrow. At the same time, it becomes rather deep, which is good because when we want to go deep, you have to be a little bit narrow. But at the same time, there are aspects that require cultivating what you may call connecting the dots. Connecting the dots simply means that there are so many different silos and fragments of knowledge which have not been connected before in order to solve problems. Scientific common sense, which is borrowing a lot of ideas from different things and connecting them together. Of course, common sense could mean a sense which is very common, but the kind of scientific common sense I'm talking about is not common at all. Of course, moving from the tool-centric approach to problem-centric approach, which often requires interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary, transdisciplinary, or even out-of-disciplinary thinking. People now at different stages of my life, my colleagues, my friends, even people who knew me rather well in that area of research, at different times they thought that I was a material scientist, some thought I was a chemist, physical chemist, some thought I was a physicist, some thought I was a theoretical condensed matter physicist, soft matter condensed physicist, or experimental condensed matter physicist. Very few of them actually thought I was a chemical engineer, which I am. Right. So it is not to do with actually my baggage, my personal baggage about who I was or am, but it has to do with finding exciting new problems and solving them. So while doing all of this, putting in some fun and quality and excitement of research, because I've often seen on social media, PhD students are saying, look, I'm very depressed. Things are not working because research is a creative pursuit. Sometimes, of course, depression might happen, disappointments may happen, but the whole point is if I see that excitement, if I see that problem and see the pleasure that actually it brings in terms of creative pursuits, then that problem will never happen. Let me quickly give three examples of what we may call lateral thinking, out of box thinking, creative thinking, or scientific common sense. The first example is about the rise, is about the invention of scanning tunneling microscopy and atomic force microscopy. These were the tools that made the rise of nanotechnology possible, very central to everything nano. So what is it? In nanotechnology, we want to see small things at nanoscale. So when we want to see something small, we invariably think about the concept of radiation or light, ion beam, electronic beam, or visible light in order to see things. But now you ask the question, is that the only way to see things? Right? Now you think about how a visually challenged person sees things. Well, you close your eyes, take a stick and tap on the surface and walk around. That way you make a visual map of actually what the surface looks like. So, of course, there are many ways of seeing. So it's just a question of concept about what we think is seeing. Now, if I wanted to see something small, can I use the same concept? So I can use the same concept if I make my walking stick very, very small. Let's say micro cantilever that can glide on top of a surface that I want to see. I want to see small features on nanoscale of this surface. And to do that, I take this micro needle, micro cantilever, and drag it across the surface. If I do that right, I can even see on atomic scale. Today, people can see atoms moving, so real time, for example. All of that has happened, and this happened based on a simple observation that seeing is not, it can be mechanical, for example. Oftentimes, if we can think of a new concept, then translating that concept into reality is not usually limited by technology. We are often limited by our concept rather than the technology in order to realize that concept in today's world. Case study 2 is about the rise of graphene as a wonder magical material which is now finding application in everything, whether it is electronic devices, whether it is materials to clean environment, and anything and everything for that matter. So graphene, how do you get the graphene to characterize it, to use it? Okay, this is a very simple story. Of course, I should have mentioned that AFM, STM, they got Nobel Prize very quickly within 2 years of its invention. And it's a hugely applied science. This one we are looking at graphene. Uh, Basically, the same experiment that basically could isolate graphene. That experiment was being done for many decades. So what was the difference? The difference was that the experiments, the people who had interest in a material called graphite, you take a block of graphite and you want to do some work with graphite, you want a clean surface of graphite to characterize it. One of the ways to do that would be to put a tape on the surface and peel the tape so that all the impurities and the dirt sitting on the surface can be removed, right? But you have interest in graphite and to clean the surface of graphite. Now, because graphitic layers of carbon have very low cohesion, very low strength of sticking with each other, when you peel the tape, some of the carbon atoms, a layer of carbon atoms, a two-dimensional layer of carbon atoms, would often stick to the tape. So the difference between the experiments that were being done earlier and now is that while you stick the tape, cleave it, and then throw away the tape and look at the graphitic block. Now, if you were to throw away the graphitic block and look at the tape and look at what is actually sticking there, then oftentimes you would find a layer of graphene, which is basically a single, a two-dimensional layer, which means made up of single carbon atoms, which are organized in a plane. So the whole point in this illustration, which also got a Nobel Prize, is that look, it's very important as to where we focus in our quest in science, where we focus in our experiments. We just cannot be very narrowly focused. We cannot be focused on the end point and our anticipation of that end point. Because if we do that, then we miss out what is actually interesting and original in that experiment. Oftentimes, my students have told me, they say, this experiment failed. And I was always very puzzled about what they mean by an experiment failing, because experiment is the reality. Experiment is what happens. It cannot fail. What has failed is your expectation from that experiment and your interpretation of that experiment. So theories can be horribly wrong, but experiment cannot be wrong. And this is how when the experiments fail, this is when we discover something new. The third example is about fabrication of nano objects or nano fabrication. I want to make something which is three-dimensional and complex on nano scale. How do I do that? There are two different concepts of nano fabrication. One is called top-down. Top-down basically is making use of a small machine tool, is making use of radiation like ion beam, electronic beam, and so on. Is doing lithographies, hard lithographies, soft lithographies. Much of the electronic industry is based on that. The top-down techniques, basically making use of an external tool to remove material, to add material, and so on small nanometer scales. The second concept of nano fabrication is called bottom-up. Bottom-up basically includes a self-assembly that under right set of conditions, molecules and small particles come together to make something big, to make something useful. But then if you think about, well, are these the only two ways possible? So I saw a movie in 1980s, which was a popular movie, which is Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. Essentially, if you have something big and if you can shrink it, then you can make a small replica of that, which you may call miniaturization. Would it work? Suppose, I want to make something 10 nanometer, a complex three-dimensional shape. What if I start with the same object, which is fabricated on 10 micron scale? Because making 10 micron scale is much less resource intensive and time intensive and money intensive than to make something which is 10 nanometer. And that would be a beast. So, okay, so how about making use of the concept of miniaturization? Suppose I make something big and then shrink it. Now, of course, once you have a concept, no matter how absurd, it is possible to translate that in practice, and we could do that and publish that very quickly in the top journal of material science called Advanced Materials. So how do you do that? Well, you make, let's say, an object which is bigger. Then you do molding with a gel, which can dry and then shrink. And then repeat the process, do another micro molding with a gel, which would dry and shrink, while keeping, of course, the dimensions, which means that they're shrinking in isotropic and without cracks. That's the only technical problem to solve. but it is all doable. And in fact, we could show that this method would work in making small objects. So not only that, the concept was very useful. For example, making devices by soft lithography. So you can almost any lab in lithography can do, let us say, lithography at micron scale, but not so well on nanometer scale. So if you were to create a pattern with lithography on micron scale, let us say, then make a replica of it in a gel, then dry the gel, then it shrinks. So therefore, you are able to make actually stuff which is really on nanometer scale, but without making use of very expensive tools which are available only in a few labs. Uh, so while talking about interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary, while we have thousands of silos of knowledge, to my mind, in science and technology, they can all be put under 5 M's of doing science. These 5 M's that I call them mechanics, which is the understanding of how things happen, why they happen, and so on. Much of our education, 80% of education, is focused on mechanics, classical or quantum, chemical, mechanical, electronic, what have you. Second M is, of course, materials, because without materials, we do nothing. Third one is the integration in order to produce a device, a system, the final product, or a machine, you may call it, in order to fulfill the need that we are looking at. The fourth one, which is often ignored completely, is manufacturing. Because after making prototypes and stuff like that, having good mechanics, understanding materials, making a machine out of all of that, if you can't manufacture it at a scale and so on with right kind of design, that won't go very far. And the fifth M is indeed man or woman for that matter. So what it means is that all of the science and technology that we do, it's not standalone. It's not for its own sake. What is it that, how do we integrate actually the man with the machine and everything else with science and technology? That also is part of science and technology. Okay, so in terms of future and what kind of technologies that we pay attention to is about one of the very inspiring sources of new science and technology is nature. It's so complex, but it's so perfect because it's taken millions of years to evolve. It has all the time for trial and error. So the kind of materials that we encounter in nature, the processing and tools, fabrication, manufacturing in nature, devices and machines, functions, and even the principles based on which all of that happens. It is such a rich mine, all the way from materials to wisdom that science and technology can leverage for a very, very long time to come. Inexhaustible mine indeed. Now, of course, if you talk about materials, for example, what are the things which are happening in materials? Of course, materials are going from passive materials to responsive materials, stimuli responsive materials, functional materials, smart materials, even intelligent materials. And the key to further development in materials is basically embedding some information, data, and knowledge in materials, just the way it happens in nature. So whether you look at DNA or anything else, it's got its own intelligence, if you would. So going forward in the future is about the convergence of materials with other things, especially the knowledge and information content. So are we looking at in the future conscious materials, wise materials, even spiritual materials? Certainly. Now, to give you some examples of nature-inspired materials and how beautiful and functional they are, unlike the man-made materials. Some simple examples. Look at the structural, vibrant colors that one finds in nature, whether it's peacock feathers, whether it is butterfly wings. Look at these leaves which are water repellent, like a lotus leaf. It is self-clean, nothing sticks to it. Even Buddha talked about it by saying, live in the world like a lotus leaf. You may be in the muck, but nothing will stick to you. Look at the ceramics which are found in nature. They are made under ambient conditions, whereas the man-made ceramics are made under extreme conditions of pressure, temperature, and so on. Bioadhesion is another very interesting example. You see all these frogs and geckos and insects. They are walking around on surfaces. They can change the strength of their adhesion depending on the situation, and it's reversible, reusable adhesion. Unlike the tape that I put on a surface, if I peel it, it's gone. It's very interesting that all of these examples are in fact related to physics of materials rather than the chemistry of materials. What I mean by that is you can get the same functionality of adhesion, wetting, colors, what have you, in any material if you create the right kind of micro nano texture on its surface. So all of these functionalities, they have something in common, which has to do with the hierarchical micro nano features or topography on their surfaces. Very interesting indeed. And so by understanding how it happens in nature, we can translate, we can learn about deep science, but we can also translate that understanding in terms of products and technologies. In terms of manufacturing, we are moving into a world in which there is a whole lot of desktop manufacturing, personal manufacturing, point of need manufacturing, and of course, the large scale manufacturing is moving to the concept of Industry 4.0. Industry 4.0 basically is a convergence of the technologies of physical machines working with machine learning, autonomous decision making, and autonomous actions. Another thing we can learn from nature as a principle is the value for diversity, which also needs to be there in science and technology. Now, India is a very diverse country. And the diversity of our needs must be reflected in the diversity of our science, technology, and innovation to satisfy those needs. Now, what is a principle? In nature, we often think that the nature is optimal. Nothing would be farther from truth. Nature actually does not value optimality for the same function, but it values diversity, which means many different ways of achieving the same function. Now, why is diversity important? Because if we were all clones of each other, no matter how optimal we are, the first virus that kills one of us will kill all of us. So therefore, the optimality is optimality under changing circumstances. And that's the very important key. So whether it is the inclusion and diversity in terms of gender, because diversity brings different perspectives. It throws different needs and so on. So whether it is diversity about gender, about age, the diversity about socioeconomic background, whether it is about the geographic location, what have you. It is not simply lip service. The diversity has value because of this very deep underpinning of the meaning and the reason for diversity. Okay, let us look at, people always asking, okay, what about the future? What do we need to be prepared for? What are the directions and drivers of that future in science and technology? Now, the predictions are very hard. We all know, especially about the future. And of course, best way to predict the future is to invent it, to take control of it. And we have seen that during COVID-19 times. Those of you who have interest in the technology roadmap of the future may wish to consult the Technology Vision 2035. It's available free downloading from TIFAC site, which is a think tank of Department of Science and Technology. So there is a Technology Vision 2035. At the same time, sectoral reports of technology in health, in transport, in energy, in water, and what have you. So this is a very useful reading for all scientists, no matter what kind of work I do. Okay, so this is, the future. Many challenges of future are coming at us at unprecedented rate, even exponential rate. This is very interesting because why is it important for us scientists and for the science that we do? And indeed, even for policies and governance and development and what have you. It is important and interesting because the processes of mind, they change slowly, linearly with a small slope. But the technology is a different beast. It changes disruptively. It can change exponentially. So therefore, we can be out of sync, for example. So our large parts of society or even science fall out of sync with very rapid disruptive changes. So what are these changes which are on the horizon and happening now? And what kind of mind is actually required to negotiate those changes? That's what I want to talk. Let's talk about challenge one, the rise of intelligent machines. Now, what is different about it? Okay, the difference is that there is a convergence between cyber and digital on one hand and physical on the other. So there is a seamless working together of materials, of machines, of communication, of perception through sensors, of computing, distributed computing at the edge, computing everywhere, autonomous decision making through tools of artificial intelligence like machine learning, deep learning, and so on, the control of the process, and autonomous action, which is in terms of actuators. The bundling up of all this and going forward in the future, bringing in biological in this bundle is what would create the future, all foreseeable future indeed for the mankind. Okay, so what it means, and there are many different things that we talk about now. There's about Industry 4.0, it's only the beginning. Internet of Things, of robotics, cobotics, quantum technologies, what have you. All of this means that increasingly a whole lot of even cognitive jobs and creative jobs, what we call creative jobs in science, are going to be done by machines. Why machines? Because machines are so much better at pattern recognition than a human mind is. To give you an example, the old computer Stockfish defeated the world chess champion in 1990s. Now, the Stockfish computer, which had all the total accumulated human knowledge about playing chess, all the grandmasters, that could be defeated by the new computer Alpha Zero by learning chess by itself in 4 hours and then defeating the accumulated wisdom and knowledge about chess playing that all the human history had. And so this is just an example. What it means is that the pattern recognition and basically saying, look, what is the underlying pattern in all of this? And this is what we do in science. Okay, the best of science actually is pattern recognition, which means generalization from data and observations. So clearly, this is going to play a huge role in the way we do science, and it's happening every day. Every day, I see 10 examples. Whether it is fluid mechanics predicting complex fluid flows, whether it is designing materials, whether it's designing drugs, whether it's doing all this combinatorial stuff and so on. Every single thing that we do is going to be impacted by it. And this impact is not limited only to, okay, a domain of science, but very widespread wherever science and technology finds its place. And even beyond that, is going to impact learning, skills, education, work, governance, experience and entertainment, health, social interactions, judiciary, commerce, medicine, our privacy, safety, media, justice, or the lack of it, whatever. The very fundamental turning around of everything that we are and we do. So therefore, this is a revolution that we have to be totally prepared for. And this is totally, it's only the beginning, but there is no stop to it. Okay, so well, in response to that, of course, DST had launched several missions, cyber physical mission, quantum systems, supercomputing mission, and very many more. And all of us, whether it's CSIR, anybody, and globally, everybody is really focused on these themes. In fact, for example, NSF has never been cooperating directly, collaborating with appropriate counterparts in India, DBT, DST, CSIR, and so on. But once we started a mission in cyber physical systems, they came around and they said, look, they have a special scheme wherein the American researchers would be given extra $100,000 to cooperate with the hubs of cyber physical systems established in India. So, its reach is very pervasive: agriculture, healthcare, education, transport, cities, energy, water, manufacturing, ethics, what have you. The overarching challenge number two for the humanity, for which science and technology, together with policies and together with the societal will, are the keys, is the sustainability, sustainable development, and including climate change. So there are 17, as we know, sustainable development goals. But me as a scientist working in any particular area, I think it would be, it is necessary, absolutely necessary, that I go through all the sub goals and tie in to see which of these goals actually are related to my area of research. A deep understanding of that would be so useful. However, of course, we must recognize the fact that science and technology, in the absence of a deep understanding of who we are and where we are going, in the deep understanding of that, and there's translation in terms of policies, regulation, and societal will, mere science and technology is not sufficient. And we have seen it. We see it repeatedly in everyday life when technology solutions are available, but on the ground, they are not implemented and they are not working. Okay, so let me, say very quickly that every technology has some lights and shadows of technology. We are basically, because we are fragmented, we focus only on the lights of a particular technology, but we ignore the shadows. Let me just kind of quote a person. He said, I used to think that top problems are biodiversity loss, ecosystem collapse, and climate change. I thought with 30 years of good science, we could address these problems. We could address these problems, but I was wrong. The top problems are selfishness, greed, and apathy. And to deal with those, we need a cultural transformation. And we scientists don't know how to do that. Whatever he's saying about scientists is true for every segment of society. Challenge number three is innovation. Understanding of what innovation is and put it in practice. Innovation is opposite of invention. So while invention creates new knowledge and it requires resources, innovation takes in new knowledge and creates new resources. So they are 180-degree opposite of each other. It is the invention and innovation working together, Lakshmi and Saraswati working together, that makes knowledge sustainable. Otherwise, just like we want sustainability in everything, but if we want sustainability of knowledge, it means that we need to create and disseminate knowledge, but we also have to use that knowledge. And these are two different ecosystems of knowledge working together. And of course, the time has never been more right to get into innovation in the country. As we said, like, okay, last 7 years, 5 years have seen such huge strides in startups, in innovation. Basically, the point is, are we training our people, whether it's PhD students, whether it is anybody, are we training them for innovation or are we training them only for invention? A deep understanding of how training for innovation is radically or can be radically different for training for invention is really the crux of the matter. Okay, I talked about another challenge, which is basically related to diversity, demography, globalization, the winds of globalization, and so on. Okay, so now you were to look at the processes of science and technology in the new mind, which is able to negotiate the change. It is basically increasing shift from tool-centric to problem-centric approach, integration and synthesis, and not only analysis. While we have gotten very good at analysis, because our training is chapter to chapter, semester to semester, course to course, job to job, the holistic nature of all that in terms of synthesis leaves something to be desired. Of course, creativity, common sense, connecting the dots, intuition usually go in short supply once I am so highly trained in a very narrow domain of knowledge. Convergence of different domains of knowledge and co-arising of them, so important. And our ability to understand and negotiate change. We have seen that in COVID-19 times. Often, when COVID-19 started, people kept asking, when do we go back to the old normal? When do we become normal? There is no such thing as old normal. Things are always changing, and they are picking up speed with which they change. So moving from invention, or not moving, but balancing invention and innovation ecosystem remains the key. And all of that, policies play a very important role. So often as a scientist, I ignored reading policies. I thought that there's nothing in it for me. I couldn't be more wrong. Okay, since we'll be running out of time very quickly, let me quickly go through. Well, when we want to talk about future, right? And we say, what is a future technology? You can give thousands of examples of future technologies and so on. I'm not interested in that. What one ought to be also interested in is knowing what are the directions and drivers of the future. And the technologies and science and industry and everything comes from there. That is the source. So basically, the source is what the mind wants. You want to be healthy, to have quality of life, to be connected with equality, to learn and to apply that learning, to make decisions in complexity, to be entertained. Entertainment is, I'm saying in a metaphorical way. We all want to be entertained, even in meetings and everything, to have a better life, to be happy, to find fulfillment, to create and control my own world, to live long, maybe forever if possible. Of course, in all of this, the mistake, very fundamental mistake we have made in our life, which translates into our science and technology, that the concept of happiness, whatever that is equaled with the consumption. And this is a very recent mistake in the history of humankind. It is only 200 years old, more or less, if you would. Okay, so when we say, look, what kind of technologies are going to be coming around? All those technologies, in fact, can be imaged based on what the needs of human mind are. And indeed, one can show, for example, that the rise of virtual reality, rise of augmented reality, mixed reality, and all that comes in response to create my own world, which I can control, which is not possible with the real world, right? So all of this is happening. Let me leave with a last idea, which is when we say, look, what are the drivers of science and technology? Obviously, these are the needs of people and its mind. Um, what are these needs? First time I read about them was in Psychology 101 during my BTech. This is called Maslow's motivational model. What motivates people? What are people looking for? In this pyramid of hierarchical needs, you will see physiological needs at the bottom, then needs for safety, needs for belonging and love, needs for esteem and self-esteem, and the esteem which is received from other people. These are called deficiency needs. And technology is very good at addressing deficiency needs. Roti, kapda, and makan in a way of speaking, so to say. Now, as you move up, you have needs for growth. These are cognitive needs, aesthetic needs, needs for self-actualization, and needs for what is called transcendence. Okay, these are a little bit abstract, but from our experience of our mind, we can recognize and correlate with them. So now the interesting aspect is that technology that we look at, while most of it is actually related to what we may call deficiency needs, but we have moved away from the needs of growth. So therefore, it is clear that the future technology and science would also have to deal even more with the needs of growth once we are able to satisfy, or in parallel, as we satisfy the needs related to deficiency. This is very interesting because pre-technology societies actually paid more attention to needs for growth, which means needs which are internal to the mind. And of course, technology is more paying attention to the needs of the external world. But you see, external world comes in response to the internal needs. And so therefore, a holistic world of science and technology takes care not only of this, but also of that. For example, if I were to, talk about yoga and meditation, of course, it's science and technology, and it requires modern tools of science and technology for its growth, and it is hugely needed, right? And so, let me summarize about the future. I think future is about convergence, which means we have to shed our silos of knowledge and somehow get into the mode of problem solving rather than the tool-centric approach to science and technology. Drivers and directions of technology in understanding minds, needs, demands, wants, desires, and greed. These demands cannot be fulfilled alone with technology. It needs a balancing act. And also understanding of what technology would solve, what it would not solve, what are the shadows and lights of technology, what are the nexus of technology, what is the life cycle of technology. Okay, technology is a good servant, but it will take increasing control. I mean, I have seen this happen in my own life. I'm only 60 years old, and the next 50 years are critical. Technology is a good servant, but it will take increasing control. And we will happily relinquish our own control to pass it on to technology because we want greater efficiency. This is only a partial worldview. If we want it to be holistic, there is no getting away from the fact that you cannot, humans are not good servants. They are not even good masters. And to understand actually this interplay between technology and life is the key. So it's also time to focus on higher needs, without which actually technology alone will not lead to sustainability. See, it's very simple to understand. When we talk about sustainability through technology, we are talking about greater efficiency of consumption processes. We are not talking about consumption itself. So while per capita emissions and may decrease because we have better technology, it does not mean that the total emissions will decrease. That is a key point, and that is the intersection between life and technology. So I would end there. Thank you very much for your patience. We overshot by 5 minutes or so. Thank you very much. So I stop there, and back to you.
Thank you very much, sir. Generally, invited talks are not open for any discussion. Fortunately, we are blessed with having several senior colleagues with us, Professor Goyal, Professor Harsh Gupta, Professor Dimri, Professor Tandon. I see many. So would you like to take?
I'm so happy to see them, and I'm totally delighted for any opportunity for discussion.
So, a few minutes we can take a few of the comments or queries if are any younger colleague who is wishes to get clarifications.
Yes, very important. And I'm so glad you said younger colleagues. You didn't say young because all of us are young. I haven't seen any old person in my life. So there are young people and younger people, right? So I'm so glad that you use the right terminology. Yes, let's go with the younger people because the future is all about that.
Please raise your hand, whoever, so we can accordingly allow you to speak. I think everyone is so overwhelmed with your yes.
You are very kind.
Ulusu. Bolusu Srinivas, could you unmute yourself?
Yes, sir. Good morning, sir. Yeah, good morning, Professor Sharma. Yeah,
Good morning. Good morning. Please go
it's a
ahead.
fantastic talk, sir. And yeah, I'd like to ask this. I mean, this is bothering me. This question is bothering me regarding sustainability, the term sustainability that we use. Is there any scientific basis to look at sustainability? Is sustainability term itself?
Yeah, there's a scientific base. Look, but when you talk about sustainable development in today's context, they actually is a oxymoron because sustainability and develop the concept of development we have equal to consumption are in conflict with each other. So sustainable development, okay, like I pointed out, well, if you are in a jail, you can only make the jail comfortable, but you are still in the jail, right? Okay, and so technology fix of sustainability of that kind. So while it gives us optimism, I am not undermining its value. Obviously, without technology, you have nothing. Okay, so it's a necessary but not sufficient condition. What is sufficient is that we understand actually that deeper aspects of not just technology, but saying how that technology would translate, how it would be applied, who will apply it, at what cost, and so on, and decouple it from the model of economic growth that we have currently. So that model of the current model of economic growth is based on what is called the Chicago School of Economics, which is only 100 years old. Okay, so how we become rich? You see, it had always puzzled me. Even when I was a child, I had, how come this such and such country is rich, and we are saying we are not rich? What a doctor here gets this salary, doctor there gets this salary. They're doing the same work, right? These are deeper questions, and it's no point actually me giving any answer that I think about these questions. I think it is each one of us scientists, human beings, to deeply explore these questions and come to our conclusions about them and saying, look, is it going to work? In the long run, it's not going to work. So therefore, that's why I'm saying, even you see, we always thought that science and technology is only related to the lower needs of human beings in Maslow's, pyramid representation of needs. But I think we were wrong. So even the growth of science and technology going forward in the future requires that we pay attention to needs of mind in all its forms and not only very gross materialistic needs. Because even these gross materialistic needs beyond a certain point are only to satisfy our higher needs. But if they are not doing that, then it is time to re-question, to question the very basic assumptions that we grew up with, which may not be right. Right. So technology certainly science certainly required to deal with our challenges, but it's not sufficient. And this is true also for intelligent machines and what role they would play, and how increasingly they will take over our lives and livelihood. So these are overarching challenges. I call them overarching, A, because they are going to be around us forever. B, that they would increase in importance even exponentially at some point. And third, that they're going to impact every aspect of our life.
Thank you, sir. So we'd like to have a formal vote of thanks, though there is no word that we can really thank you. And we would like to take once again your word that having you physically at the CSIR-NGRI, particularly to show you that how diverse we are. We have the rocks from 3.9 billion years to the present, and we also have researchers who excelled at the highest level to the research fellows. So science and scientists, all the diversities we have, and we would like to have your wisdom and your directions once you are at our institute. So I pass on to our senior most colleague, Dr. Poon Chandra, for formal vote of thanks.
Professor Tiwari, thank you very much. I just want to quickly say that the new, if I were with you physically, we would be having lunch. The new normal is that you can deliver pizza at my home. I'm saying that in light. I mean, I say that in all the meetings. I say, look, I mean, we can learn to do things in different way, like we are talking remotely, but now everything is delivered by Amazon or somebody or other. Okay.
Thank you very much, sir, for a very enlightening and very absorbing talk. And it was really amazing to see that such an important topic like the new millennium S&T you have addressed using diverse out-of-the-box ideas and concepts. A very deep learning, I would say, for all the scientists and all those who have attended this talk. I think it's a great privilege and honor, sir, for all of us. You have taken us through very new concepts like the new mind of S&T. You have talked about deep strength in R&D and the new enabling policies that should be grabbed. You presented excellent case studies covering the concepts that seeing is believing, where we focus is important, lateral and outrageous thinking, and also the 5 M's of science. And I really loved the sentence, best way to predict the future is to invent it. That really shows how much we can think of controlling the future rather than being swayed by it. And there were many interesting things that you covered, including the rise of intelligent machines, the lights and shadows of technology, and so on. And thank you very much for covering the important national missions of the country, like the clean energy, water, climate, and so on. And it was very impressive usage of terms like Lakshmi and Saraswati together, leading to sustenance. I think that's something really worth putting our mind on. And finally, from a very scientific talk, you brought us to the very basic aspects of mind, happiness, and psychology. So, finally, the Maslow's motivation model, where we can distinguish between the deficiency needs and the growth needs. So all this is a lot of food for thought for all of us. And I feel extremely happy and privileged. And I would say this on behalf of all my colleagues, that we were very privileged, sir, to listen to your such a very important talk, very interesting talk. I just wanted to know, maybe I should have asked this earlier, whether there is already in place a plan or something that we are already trying to implement these ideas, because as long as they remain abstract, then obviously we don't get the benefit of this.
No, absolutely. In fact, my first year in DST office, we had started a mission on science and technology. Don't laugh, of yoga and meditation. Okay, and so I mean, people come around, they say, hey, is that pseudoscience? What are you trying to do? No, I explained to them properly. It's not pseudoscience. Only Indians think this is pseudoscience, unfortunately. If you go to Stanford, MIT, they are actually doing deep research in yoga and meditation, making use of the modern tools of science and technology. No aspect of knowledge is stagnant, right? So, of course, you have traditional wisdom and you grow it. I mean, you make it more relevant for today's world, right? And of course, the missions which are related to cyber physical systems and so on, now quantum technology would be coming up. All of these are in response to the changing landscape of science and technology. Having said that, you see, I said basically it's the will of society that determines everything in the final analysis, right? And so our interaction of the scientific ecosystem with the society at large, those connects are rather weak. So a very limited step in that direction was formulating a policy and concept for scientific social responsibility. Now, I mean, it would require 2 hours, minimum 1 hour, to basically talk about that concept and its translation into practice. But I'm saying, okay, this is something that all of us, scientific community, has to think about these aspects and see how we translate them into practice.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. So once again, on behalf of Director NGRI and all the staff members of CSR NGRI, we thank you very much for being with us. We do hope in future we can see you and interact with you physically in CSR NGRI. Sir, thank you. Thank you very much. And I'm very thankful to Director NGRI who has the very best thing he has done is I think to think of inviting you for this very auspicious day. So a very befitting lecture on this auspicious day of the National Science Day. I'm also grateful to the information section, headed by Dr. Devinder, and the IT section, Dr. Kalyan Neti, who have made excellent arrangements for this program of today. I'm extremely grateful to all our former directors and the present directors of the country and the eminent respected research council members who have all joined us, and to all the scientists and students who have come in good numbers to attend and to listen to this very, very important talk, such great new ideas from you, sir. So thank you very much. And thanks to one and all. Thank you so much.